Welcome back to my Safari toy box. I've got Spot with me from the Good Dinosaur movie, and today I'm going to hook up the logic for the main photography quest. Now, to save a little time, I've already done some work before the start of the video. And as you can see, I've put down a lot of Creativitoys. But don't panic. It's not difficult to hook all of this up. It's just time consuming. We'll go through it a step at a time, and I'll explain everything as we go, but be prepared to spend about 3 to 4 hours to make all of the necessary connections. Now, normally I would give you an inventory of all the toys I've placed, but there are so many that I'm not going to do it that way this time. Instead, I'll do it in stages, and I'll list out the toys you need for each stage. So the first stage, as we come over here, the first stage in building this quest is the mission giver, and we'll need a townsperson for that. But we can't just place the townsperson directly into the toy box. I'll talk about the reasons for that next time, but for now, just trust me on this. So what I'm going to do is generate the townsperson dynamically when the player enters the camp, and remove that townsperson when the player leaves the camp, just like we did for some of the mission givers in my Gravity Falls toy box and in my Agrabah toy box. So for the toys for this stage of it, to generate the townsperson and take them out, we have this locator. This is where the townsperson's going to go. We have a friend generator, a logic gate, a dynamic trigger, and a counter. Alright, so the dynamic trigger, we're going to hook this up to that locator. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I did for those other two toy boxes, so I wouldn't fast forward through this if I were you. I think this is an improvement on what I had done in the other toy boxes. But for the properties on the dynamic trigger, on the target we need to set that to be the locator. And the trigger distance, I'm going to set this to be 60. This will be a 60 unit radius around this locator, and that equates to about 15 blocks. Alright, on the timer, or the counter rather, excuse me, under the properties for this, what we're going to do is set this, we're going to leave it at 2. Visible display will be off. The rest of those properties will be off. So that's the only property I changed. And then on the friend generator, we're going to connect this up to that same locator. And on the properties for this, I'm going to set the behavior to stand still. And that's the only change I'm making there. Alright, so when the player enters the radius around this locator, we'll do a new logic connection when entered by player any. What we're going to do is input into this logic gate. And I'm using the logic gate because I only want to generate one townsperson, but you could have 2 players in the toy box. So the counter is going to keep track of the number of players that we have. The logic gate is going to help us to ensure that only one townsperson gets generated. So the dynamic trigger inputs into the logic gate, and the logic gate on output connects to the friend generator. And inside the toy box category, I'm going to scroll down. If you noticed in the trailer, I used a different townsperson than I used in the playthrough video. That's because the townsperson that I used in the trailer, I couldn't automatically or couldn't dynamically generate with a friend generator or a friendly wave generator. So that's why I changed the townsperson. Because again, it's critical that this townsperson not stay in the toy box for performance reasons. But I'll talk about that next time. So we're going to generate the Big Owl costume. Alright, and then on the friend generator, the new logic connection when generated, we'll turn around and close the logic gate. That will ensure that only one townsperson gets generated. So if player 2 wanders into this area then, it's going to pass through this gate, but the gate's closed, and it'll never make it to the friend generator. All right. So on the dynamic trigger, the other thing we need to do is use the counter to keep track of the number of players that are in this area. So a new logic connection, when entered by player, any, will come over to the counter, and we're going to increment by 1. And on the dynamic trigger, a new logic connection, when exited by player, any, will come over to our counter, and we'll decrement by 1. So the counter will keep track of the number of players that are in the area around this locator. All right, so on the counter then, a new logic connection when 0 is reached, which means that both players have left the area around the locator, then we're going to do 2 things. We're going to come over here and remove the townsperson. So we'll scroll all the way down and remove all. And the other thing the counter will do, new logic connection when 0 is reached, will open the gate back up so that when another player comes back into this area, we'll put the townsperson back. All right. And that takes care of the townsperson. And we can test that out really quick. If we come out of the editor, there's our townsperson. And when we leave the area, oops. When we leave the area, there, he goes out. So there is our townsperson for our mission giver. So the next thing we need to do is set up the townsperson as a mission giver. And to do that, we need a few more toys. We have this radar marker, we have another dynamic trigger, and a text displayer. Okay, so let's do the radar marker first. And let me get my other diagram here. We're going to do a new locator connection. I'm using the same logic diagrams, by the way, that you'll see on my blog. So we're going to connect that up to the locator. And the properties on this radar marker, I'm going to set the beacon type to be a yellow exclamation point. This is the main quest in this toy box. The beacon location needs to be at the locator, and I want this on by default when you come in the toy box. For this dynamic trigger, we'll do a new locator connection. We're going to connect that up to this same locator. And on the properties for this, the target, again, needs to be the locator. And the trigger distance on this one, I am going to set this to be 6. So a 1.5 block radius around that locator. All right, which comes out to about here. So you have to get fairly close before he'll be invoked. And we need to use this one, a different dynamic trigger. We can't reuse this one because this one is handling the generation of this. This one needs to handle the mission. They're 2 different behaviors, so we need 2 different dynamic triggers. And then on the text displayer, under the properties for that, text duration will be 3, text style will be banner. All right, so we're going to display a little bit of text. He's going to tell the player he has a mission for him. But then he has to show the player what he wants him to do, because I can't tell him with text. And so for that, we have a target camera that I have set up over here. And this is going to show the player the animal that we want them to go and find. So this target camera, we're going to connect up to this locator. And on the properties for this, start transition is fine. We're going to turn on use define duration, and I'm going to set this to be 5 seconds. These are fine. glow through, we'll turn that off. The camera target needs to be the locator that we just connected. We're going to turn off this flag, which means this is now active, and I'm going to set this to be 10. So that's how close we'll be to the animal, so we can get a good look at him and be able to tell exactly what it is we're searching for. And the rest of these are fine. All right. So on the dynamic trigger for the mission giver, not the townsperson generation, but the mission giver, we're going to do a new logic connection when entered by player any. All right, and the first thing we're going to do is come over to our text displayer and go all the way to the bottom to the missions category. And I'm going to say, I have a mission for you. That's what I want him to say. All right. The other thing this will do, new logic connection when entered by player any. I want to turn off the radar marker. And I also want to turn this off so that we only do this once. So on the radar marker, we can do a new logic connection. When that's deactivated, turn around and turn off the dynamic trigger. So that way when we enter this area, or both players enter, we only see that text one time. And then on the text displayer, we'll do a new logic connection when any text is dismissed. So once that text closes, which is after about 3 seconds, because that's what I set the property to on the text displayer, we'll come over and activate this camera. And this camera will be on for 5 seconds to show the player what it is they need to go and search for. And then the player is going to search for one of 10 animals that'll be selected randomly. That's why we have this randomizer out here. So on the dynamic trigger, we'll do a new logic connection when entered by player any. We'll connect up to the randomizer and we'll do an action. So this does 3 things. It turns off the radar marker, it displays the text, and after the text is done, turns on the camera, and it also invokes the randomizer. All right, so that's the end of stage 2. Stage 1 was the townsperson generation. Second stage is the mission giver and kicking off the mission. And the randomizer is going to choose one of 10 different sets of creativitoys. So there's one set of creativitoys for each of the 10 possible animals that the player can search for. And I've already hooked up 9 of these, and I'll get to this in a moment. But this is the third stage. So each set of toys that this is going to activate will manage this next part of the quest. So if we come over here, I have 10 rows of toys. All right, so this is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. There's 4 toys in each row, and I've got 10 rows. All right, so random trigger 1 will invoke this logic gate. Random trigger 2 will invoke this logic gate, and so on. And the way you hook those up is you come over to the randomizer, do a new logic connection, and I've hooked up all of these except random trigger 10. So I'm going to hook random trigger 10 up to the logic gate here on the end. And we'll do an input. Okay. Random trigger signal 9 comes into this logic gate. Random trigger signal 8 comes into that one, and so on down the line. All right. So there's 10 rows, and these 4 toys handle the search for the animal. Okay. And then we have a set of toys over here for the end of mission, and I'll get to those in a bit. Now, inside of each row, there are 4 creativitoys. There's a logic gate, there is a friendly wave generator, a dynamic trigger, and a second friendly wave generator. So there's 2 friendly wave generators in each row. The one on the end is for the locator over there. So each of these I've done a new locator connection, and I've connected it up to this locator over here at the camera. So the friendly wave generator at the end is used to show the player the animal we want them to search for. The other one is used to show them, or is used for the animal that they're actually searching for. And these are connected up to a bunch of locators, and I'll get to that in just a moment. All right. Let's see, probably the next thing to do. So we've got 10 rows of toys, 1 for each row. We also have 10 cameras out here. You can only connect a camera up to 1 actor. So I need 1 camera in addition to those each of those rows of toys. And where I've placed them, you can kind of see I put some blocks in here just to kind of show you the spacing for where I put these cameras. And so if these over here were numbered 1 through 10, facing that way with 1 on the left, 10 on the right, it's the same over here. So this is the camera that goes with row number 1 over there. This is the camera that goes with row 2, row 3, and you can see I've hooked all of these up except the last one. And I haven't done this one because I want to show you how to do this. So my plan is to show you how to hook up 1 row of these toys, and then you can go off and do all of the other rows the same because they're basically the same connections. So I'm only going to show you this once. All right. So each of these cameras, you're going to connect it up to its corresponding row. And you do that by coming in here doing a new actor connection. And that was the camera for row 10. So we're going to come over to this friendly wave generator here and set that to be the camera target. That's going to be our actor. This is the animal we're searching for. Again, this is the just for a mission objective. That's all this row of friendly wave generators does. This is the row we're searching for. So that's the one that gets connected to the camera. And then the camera over there for row 9 would get connected to this one. And you can see it was, and so on down the line. All right. So as I said, this isn't difficult to hook up, it's just tedious. All right, so on this camera, we'll look at the properties. All of the cameras are configured the same way. So cut, I have it turned on to use a defined duration, and I've set that to 5 seconds. These are the default values. I've turned off glow through. The camera target has to be the connected actor, so you want to make sure you pick that from the list. I turn off the use camera position to set zoom distance, and we set the zoom distance to 10, and these are fine. And you'll set those same properties on all 10 cameras. Okay? So that's the cameras. Now, I put the cameras on this end of the toy box, facing that way. Because all of the friendly wave generators want to spawn the townspeople facing toward the east, toward the sunset or sunrise. And so, since I want the pictures that Mickey takes to see the face of the animal, that's why I put all of the cameras down on this end. Okay? Because I want to take a picture of the animal from the front. And those friendly wave generators are going to spawn the townspeople facing this direction, regardless of how I orient the locators. So that's why I did it this way. All right, so these are the cameras that I've set up. So everything, all of these cameras are looking in that direction. And again, this is one of the limitations with the toy box cameras, because the cameras are always going to take a picture based on where you place the camera. It doesn't matter where the player is standing or which direction the player is facing. The player has nothing to do with it. It's all dependent on where you place the camera as to what kind of shot you're going to get. And I could not figure out how to get a camera to take a picture from the player's position looking in the direction the player is looking. So this is one of the limitations that we have with these cameras. All right. So now that the cameras are set up, what you need are some locators around the toy box where the animals are going to be. And I've placed about 40 locators around the toy box as potential spawn points for the animals. There's one back there, there's one here. I placed one over here. I placed one down on this end. And I'll kind of fly through and show you where I place these. But you want to place these such that the cameras either have a clear line of sight to the cameras, so that there's no obstructions, or that there are no obstructions for about 2 to 3 blocks in front of the camera, because I set the distance on those cameras to be 10, which is 2.5 blocks. And so, for example, if we look at the canyons over here, I dropped a locator right here. And this actually works. It doesn't have a clear line of sight to the cameras. However, there's nothing in front of the camera for about 2.5 blocks. And so this works fine. If I put this locator over here, then this stone becomes in the way. And when the camera turns on, it's like the camera is sitting inside this cliff. And so all you see is rock. So you have to be careful where you place these. Again, you want either a clear line of sight to the cameras or nothing in front of the camera or in front of the locator for about 3 blocks. So I placed some there. I placed one over here. Placed one over here. It doesn't really matter where you put these. You want to scatter them around the toy box though. I've got one down here. I've got several of them set up around the oasis. So there's one there. There's a couple over here. And actually, as I'm looking at it, this one is probably going to be a problem because of this tree. Let's see, there's one over here on this side of this bush. There's one up on this hill. There's one over here by this rock. And that does have a clear line of sight to those cameras. So that's good. Up on Pride Rock. And so on. You kind of get the idea. There's one over here behind this stone. One over here. I've got one up here. There's about 40 locators scattered around on those rocks down there. On top of that rock. Over here on the edge of the toy box. Back in this corner. So they're all over. The animal can be anywhere just about in this toy box, as you can see. Locators over there. Now when you get up on the mountain, it gets a little tricky because this upper level is actually at a higher elevation than those cameras. So you're going to have the same sort of problem like this one here. Actually, I forgot to move this one. But when you take a picture from the camera, and you back this up about 10 units, 2.5 blocks, it's going to be as if the camera is here. And so you're actually going to be looking at stone. So that's actually a bad position for this locator. What you want is to have this maybe out here towards the edge. It doesn't have to be right on the edge, but about 10 units out here. You want the camera to be out at this point. And again, the camera is going to be lower. So you might be looking up at the animal and just barely see him. So maybe he does need to be a little closer to the edge. You have to play around with these as you encounter them. This one here, I originally had up by the waterfall, and I had that problem. but I moved it out here by the edge of this cliff, and I don't have a problem with that one. But you get the idea. Just locators, you know, everywhere. And so those are all of the places that you're going to put locators. You can put locators anywhere you want, essentially, but again, make sure you have a clear line of sight to those cameras or nothing obstructing that locator for about 3 blocks in front of it. Okay, so now what you're going to do once you have your locators down is you're going to connect up each of these friendly wave generators to about 10 to 15 of those locators. I've got 40 of them down, but you'll notice as I mouse over this, there's a lot of lag. Let's go to one of these earlier ones that I did. So you can see when I connect, there's a lot of connections. So whenever you try to select this or select that, if you notice there's a little bit of lag that shows up there. The more connections you add, the more of those lines the game has to render and the greater the lag. So again, you want to limit your connections to about 10 to 15 of these, and you do that with a new locator connection, and you just go out and pick a locator. And I would recommend mixing it up a little bit. You don't want to connect all 10 of those friendly wave generators to the same locators, and you don't want to connect up the friendly wave generator to locators that are all in one area of the toy box. You want to spread them around a little bit so that it's not too predictable. The more places you can have the animals, the wider variety, the better, because then you just never know where they're going to show up. But you're going to do that for every one of these friendly wave generators, the first one in the row, not this one. This one only connects up to the locator over by that camera, because again, this is for the mission objective. All right, so after you've connected these, what you want to do is configure the waves. And let's start down on this end. And when you configure these, in each row, both of the friendly wave generators are going to be configured the same way. So this one will do, because I don't have as much lag on this one. When you configure the wave, I've set this one to be Pumbaa. Okay? And the same with this one. This one I've configured to use Timon, and the same with the other one in this row. Row number 3 is set up for Tigger. Row number 4, and if you don't like my choices, you can pick others. Row number 4 is Baloo. Row number 5 is Louie. Row number 6 is Flint. Row number 7 is Elliot. And you say, yeah, he's not a real character. It's Disney, who cares? No reason you can't have him out here. Row number 8 is Dumbo. Row number 9 is Dale. And row number 10, you've probably guessed it, is Chip. And again, if you don't like my choices, you can pick other ones. But those are what I did. So both of these in this row are set to be Chip. Now this wave generator on the properties, everything in here, I've turned generation delay to 0, and I'm disabling the generation effects. Okay, these stay the same. And under the generated friend options, behavior is set to stand still. And the same properties are set for all 10 of these along the back row. Again, this is for the mission objective animal. These are configured almost the same way, but it's a little bit different. So for these, Generate at Random Locator is on. So the friendly wave generator for the actual animal you're going to search for is going to put him at a random locator, one of the 10 to 15 that you connect up to this toy. And all the rest of these are set the same. And you'll notice I even have this one set to stand still. I had it set to wander at first, which made it more interesting to try to find them, but I also ran into a lot more problems when I went to take the picture, because they could wander behind something that obstructed the camera. So it was just easier to make them stand still. Okay, and so you're going to configure all 10 of those the same way. And again, the only difference between this friendly wave generator and the other one in the row is that this one is set to generate at a random locator, and that one is not. All right? Okay, now here's the connections that you make for each of the toys in the row. So the randomizer over there invokes the logic gate. And I'm using a logic gate because if you have problems with a particular row, it's very easy to hook a button up to this gate with one logic connection, push the button, and you can test the row to see if it works. So that's why I'm using the logic gate. It just made it a lot easier for testing purposes. But on the logic gate, we're already being input from the randomizer. So when the randomizer invokes the logic gate for this row, what we're going to do is, well, let's see. Let's do the first things first. One more thing I want to do first. On the level starter, I've got a level starter over here. We want to do a new logic connection on Catalyze. We want to turn off this dynamic trigger. Okay? And you do that again for all 10 of those dynamic triggers, the one in each row, because I want that off by default when you come into the toy box. And I've already hooked it up for those other ones, as you can see. And we'll hook this button up, new logic connection when pressed, because we're already in the toy box and I don't want to exit out of it. So with that button hooked up to the level starter, all we have to do is come out and push that button. And now all 10 of those dynamic triggers are disabled. And what that means is that I don't want these doing anything until that particular row is turned on by the randomizer. Okay? So when the randomizer invokes this row and connects to through this logic gate, on this logic gate we want to do a new logic connection on output, and I want to turn on the dynamic trigger in this row. Okay? The second thing we want to do on that logic gate is a new logic connection. Oops, not on open. Let me cancel. New logic connection on output. We want to come over to the friendly wave generator for the mission objective and generate the wave. And that will put the animal over at that camera, which has also coincidentally just been turned on at the same time the randomizer is invoked. So this will put the animal out there that shows the player what it is that they're searching for. And then the other thing this logic gate needs to do is a new logic connection on output. We want to connect up to this other friendly wave generator for the animal we're actually going to search for and generate the wave. And that will put the animal out at one of the connected locators picked randomly. Okay. Now, once that has been done, that camera is on, and the animal we're going to be searching for is at that locator. When that camera goes off, we want to take that animal back out because he's just wasting resources. So to do that, I've got a time delayer out here. And this time delayer is set to a delay time of 10 seconds. Okay? And this time delayer connects up to every one of these friendly wave generators. When the delay is completed, it defeats the wave. So on this time delayer, I've already done that for the first 9. So we're going to do a new logic connection when delay is completed. We want to come over to our last one here. Oh, it already is hooked up. And we're going to defeat the wave. So let me cancel out of this. Yeah, that's already connected up. And I put this time delayer here on the same row as these objects, just so that I could remember that this goes with all of these. So the last thing our logic gate here for this row needs to do is a new logic connection on output. We want to connect up to this time delayer and start the delay. Okay, so then 10 seconds later, it's just going to blindly run through all of these and defeat the waves. And I could have done a separate time delayer for every row, and I did that initially, but I realized didn't really need to. One time delayer would work. So that's what we've got there. Okay, so that's what happens when we invoke the row with the randomizer, is we generate the wave for both friendly wave generators, we turn on the dynamic trigger for this row, and we invoke that time delayer to remove this townsperson when that camera turns off. Okay? Alright. So then the player goes out, they look for the animal, and they might need a little help with that. And that's why we have the radar marker. And so this radar marker that's here, and I've put this again on the same row as all of those, so I know this is the radar marker that goes with all of these. On this radar marker, we want to do a new actor connection, and we're connecting it up to every one of these friendly wave generators in this row. Okay, so that one radar marker is reused, just like this time delayer is reused. This one's reused for every one of these friendly wave generators. So all 10 of these, okay? And we connect to all 10 of them as actors. And then on the properties for this, beacon type is a yellow arrow. The beacon location has to be set to the connected actor, and active is turned off by default. So when you come into the toy box, this is not on. And to turn that on, we have the power switch here at the radar tower. So on the power switch, we do a new logic connection. When it's turned on, we activate the radar marker. And on the power switch, new logic connection. When it's turned off, we deactivate that radar marker. And again, that's connected up to all of these. But only one of these is going to be invoked. One of these rows is going to be invoked by the randomizer. So the radar marker will only show up at the one that is actually generated in a townsperson. Okay. And I think that's enough on that for right now. All right, so that's the radar marker. Now, once the player finds the animal, that's what this dynamic trigger here does, the one in the row. And so this let's see if I already, nope, okay. So for this, on the dynamic trigger in this row, we're going to do a new actor connection. We're going to connect that up to the friendly wave generator in that row. That'll be the actor for the dynamic trigger. And on the properties for the dynamic trigger, the target's the connected actor, and I've set the trigger distance to 8. That's 2 blocks. So when the player enters that 2-block radius around the dynamic trigger, we do a new logic connection. When entered by player, any. What we're going to do here, first thing we want to do is activate the camera for this row. for row 10, that'll be this camera. We activate that camera, and that will run for 5 seconds. All right, on the dynamic trigger, new logic connection, when entered by player any. The next thing we want to do, there's actually a bunch of things. These things are the same for every row. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take and connect over to a logic gate over here. This is going to be the end of the mission logic gate. This will kick off everything else for the end of the mission. And we're going to input into that gate. All right. And then this will drive everything else for the end of the mission. So there's only 2 things the dynamic trigger in each row needs to do. Right? It needs to turn on the camera for that row, and it needs to connect up to the end of mission gate, which is this one right here. And then this gate will drive the rest of the mission. Okay? For ending the mission. So hopefully I haven't lost you so far. But those are all the connections that you make for each row. And so everything that I've just done with this row, you duplicate with this row. Okay? And you duplicate with this row. And you're only dealing with the toys in this row and the camera that goes along with this row. And you have the shared radar marker, the shared time delayer here, and this shared logic gate for the end of the mission. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, there's logic diagrams on my blog that should help you with this. All right, so for the end of the mission, let's see, how am I doing here on time? 42 minutes in. All right. Okay, so on this logic gate, there's a number of things we need to do. So the first thing I want to do is a new logic connection on output. What we want to have happen is we want to come back to this dynamic trigger and turn it off. And that logic gate is going to turn off all of these dynamic triggers because it doesn't know which one is currently on, so it just turns off all of them. All right. And I've already hooked it up to the other 9. The next thing this is going to do is a new logic connection on output. We are going to, let's see, what's the best way to do this? I think I have something a little bit, oh no, I'm correct. Okay. Sorry, I got a little confused by my diagram. The next thing we're going to do is come over to the stopwatch, and we're going to start the stopwatch. Okay, so that freezes the animal, so they're not moving, so it kind of looks like a photograph. And that'll stay on until we turn it off. And to do that, we're going to need a time delayer, and that's what this one is for. So if we come in here, we're going to set the delay time on this to be 5.5 seconds. All right? Because the cameras over there stay on for 5 seconds, so I want to make sure the animal is frozen for as long as that camera is on. So on output from this logic gate, new logic connection on output, we're going to come over to this time delayer and start the delay. And on the time delayer, a new logic connection. When that delay is completed, come over to the stopwatch and stop it. Because the stopwatch freezes everything in the toy box. All of the enemies, townspeople, critters, all of it. Okay. The other thing we want to do is when we activate that camera out there, it'd be nice to play some kind of a camera shutter click. So we want to play a sound effect. So on this logic gate, a new logic connection on output. We're going to come over to our sound generator. And under the general category, I've looked through this entire category and I have not found any kind of camera sound, which I thought was pretty bad, that there's not a camera sound in here. There's so many other things. The closest thing I could find was the light bulb sound, and that sounds like a pulling the chain to turn on a light bulb. That's the closest thing I could find to a camera shutter being activated. So that's what I used for that. And on this sound effects generator, we want to make sure we turn off the property for 3D sound at speaker or locator so that the player hears this no matter where they are in the toy box. Alright. And then the other thing we want to do coming out of this, and I think I've already got the connection there, is you're going to do a new logic connection on output. You're going to come over to the radar marker that you see highlighted in yellow there and deactivate it. Okay? So again, a new logic connection on output. You're going to come over here and deactivate this radar marker. And that connection's already there, so I can't make it again for you, so I'll cancel out of that. Ah! Hate when that happens. I'll have to fix that later. Okay. And that is everything that this logic gate here has to do. Nope, there's one more thing. Nope, I take that back. Cancel. That's everything that gate does. Okay, so on this time delayer over here, the one that turned off the stopwatch, we're going to have it do a couple of other things. Because once the stopwatch is turned off, that camera has been turned off, the stopwatch has been turned off. We'll do two more things, our standard end of mission things. So when the delay is completed, come over to our action enforcer and we'll have all the players celebrate. And we'll also play our end of mission sound. So a new logic connection when that delay is completed. Come over here. And, not the general. Under musical, we'll do fanfare. Okay. Alright, one last thing we want to do is once the quest is over, we want to take the animal that has been found back out of the toy box. And I want to wait a little bit. I don't want to have it be a sudden jarring thing to have that animal disappear. So that's why we have this time delayer here. And the properties on this are set to 10 seconds. So on the action enforcer, we'll do a new logic connection when action is attempted. So when the players celebrate, we can come over here and start the delay. And on this, a new logic connection when the delay is completed. We're going to come out to our friendly wave generator and defeat the wave. And you're going to do that for all 10 of those friendly wave generators down the line here. And I've already hooked up the other 9, as you can see. Alright. And one more thing I thought of too is when this logic gate turns off this radar marker, we want to make sure that power switch gets reset. So new logic connection on the radar marker. When it's deactivated, come over to our power switch and turn it off. So we make sure that gets reset. Okay, and I believe that is everything. So I'm going to go ahead and save my game at this point. And I'll put that hill back. And then we'll go ahead and test this out. Okay, so I'm back. I've saved the game. I put that hill back. Now let's go ahead and test it out. And we already know as we approach the mission giver, he spawns in. That works pretty well. Tested that earlier. So let's walk up to him and see what happens. He says, I have a mission for you. And we have Dale, row number 9. Okay, so the camera turned off. And so now, if we come into the editor, that should take the townsperson out. And it did. And we want to make sure the townsperson over here has been removed, and he has. Okay. So now we have theoretically, we have Dale somewhere in the toy box. Let's try the radar marker and see if that works. And it does. And it's pointing over in that direction. And I'll go ahead and leave it on for testing. So let's come into Spark mode, the easiest way to find him. And let's see. Looks like he's out over this way. It's the locator that we moved earlier. Yeah, we'll see how well that locator position works here. Alright, so I'm going to put Spot over here, which is far enough away that it's not going to trigger the dynamic trigger around him. And so now as we approach him, that should trigger the camera out that way. Because that dynamic trigger for row number 9 should be active. So as we walk up, there we go. And that's what the camera sees from way out at the east. Alright, and then 10 seconds later, Dale should disappear. Alright, so that wasn't too bad. You only saw his head, but that works. Okay, and then one thing I notice that I forgot is to turn on this radar marker again. Because I want the player to be able to play another quest. And so to do that, we're going to plug into this time delayer over here. This is the one that does the celebration, turns off the stopwatch, plays the sound effect for the end of the quest. So on this time delayer, new logic connection, when the delay is completed, we're going to come over to our radar marker here and activate it. And we also want to turn that dynamic trigger back on. So new logic connection, when the delay is completed, come over to the dynamic trigger for the mission and turn that on. And then the player will be able to go and play another mission. All right. So that is the main photography quest. As I said at the start of the video, it isn't too difficult to set up. It just takes time to hook up the 10 different sets of controls in each row and to hook up all of the locators. That's the one that takes the most time, is hooking up those locators. As usual, I have logic diagrams on my blog that will help you out with this, and I highly recommend them for this particular episode. The link is in the video description. Next time, we'll add the mounts and all of the critters so that this place doesn't look so empty. Until then, take care.